And my own public defenders never even reported any judge for doing horrible things that affected my case, my life, my son's life. And so that's the level of shock that it comes to with regard to judges, and the multiple crimes that a lot of judges have committed against me in this whole thing. I think is more shocking even than the lawyers, because the lawyers supposedly pull dirty tricks. They're not supposed to cross the line. They are not. And if they do, they can get in trouble. Not everything is fair game and love and war and whatever. You have still rules that you have to follow. But for a judge, the judge is not supposed to interfere with the process, and that's not been the case for me and my son. And my son has been tortured because of it, and he has continued to be tortured. And I've been tortured and continue to be tortured. And as I've been speaking about this, I have been tortured. And I'm not reacting because it's not the highest level of torture that's ever been done to me, but I can feel what they are doing to me while I'm trying to talk. And it's a technology type of a feeling. It's not anything to do with natural pain. So then when I act this whole thing out, and then I start to cry and not acting crying, but really crying, because I'm thinking about how horrible that it is, the whole situation is. I hope it doesn't look like I'm being moody, because I'm not. I chose to do that, and I tried to do it creatively so that it would give maybe somebody a better idea of how outstanding their conduct has been, and the conduct of many has been. And so and that is why I was trying to go to the East Coast, and I didn't have anybody who could leave work and take me at that time. At that time, I had never once hitchhiked a ride before. I had accepted a ride from somebody who I thought the police knew because they were around when he picked me up. It was that Italian American. After that, I didn't accept another ride. I didn't ask for a ride from anybody, and I did not quote-unquote hitchhike from anyone. That is not my style. I mean, that's not, I don't think, anybody's style, and it's certainly not a single woman's style. That's what somebody does when they're desperate, and the fact that anybody should be that desperate in America is a problem for America. Because when a normal person like me, who is pretty, at least then I was, and I had myself put together, who's petite, doesn't have a gun, doesn't have any kind of defense weapons of any kind, and when I'm put into those kinds of dangerous situations, and knowingly, I'm not losing my screws and doing that, and I'm not, or losing my marbles or whatever, flipping a screw, losing marbles upstairs here. I am basically forced into that position. I have never done anything spontaneously or impulsively in my life, aside, that's of a serious nature. If someone asks me to go with them to the store and I hadn't planned on it, yeah, that'll be spontaneous. But I mean, like something like hitchhiking? No, I would never do that. I don't like hitchhiking. I don't like the idea of it. That is something I would never do. And I would never do that. I mean, I would have to be driven to the most desperate kind of situation that anybody could imagine. And that's what this country did to me. And then they forced me into that kind of a position, knowing that I had no alternatives. A normal person, maybe someone would say, would have just stayed in the town. And what? Yeah, and a normal person who is not being treated normally would then end up in a psych ward. The way that I was being treated was not normal. So when I'm not being treated normally at all, when I'm being treated in the most atypical, abnormal way by many individuals, it means that they're forcing me to have to respond in ways that are not typical. If I didn't love my son so much, I never would have tried and worked so hard. I never would have left Canada. I never would have gone back to the United States, and the United States doesn't. That's why they stole my son from me, because that was the only way they were going to get me back to that country after they tortured the living daylights out of me. I was never going to hitchhike from one side of the country to the other side of the country. And the only reason I did is because of how much I love my son, and thinking that maybe if I go the farthest distance that I can go in this country and get as far away as I can from the people over here, I could try to find somebody who will help me. And I didn't know that half the things were still being set up in Washington, D.C. and Virginia, where the FBI headquarters is, and the CIA offices are, and the Pentagon is. They all knew. All of their senior officers knew. You don't hide big top secret projects like that from the top brass. So they basically tortured me, and then they just watched and laughed while I was put into horrible situations. And then abused more. While my son, the only thing I thought is that if I could get a test to prove that I was tortured, then I would be able to prove this without a doubt, not sound crazy. They would have to immediately return my son, and then that would be that. And then and I was blocked from doing that the entire time, because that's exactly what this country did not want. They didn't want anyone to validate me, and to have it known that what I'm saying has been happening and has happened really has happened, and that actually it's 10 times worse than I describe it as being. And they know this. They know that I have not even demonstrated the level or been able to sufficiently explain or show distress that would indicate to anybody how severe and high of a level of torture this country has used against me and my son. So I was thinking of going to Georgia because they had some medical people, and I thought I could at least prove medical malpractice for one thing and show I wasn't a hypochondriac. And then when I was stopping over at a actually I have to go back to New Mexico, because I stopped at New Mexico first. And when I was in New Mexico, I got out of the truck from the truck driver that was taking me, who was like basically making a stop at a gas station. And I got out because he was acting kind of weird. So I thought, I don't know about this one. I mean, he seemed fine in general, but I thought slightly weird, so I grabbed my things. And he sort of seemed to be going through my stuff too. And then I got out at this gas station, and there was a young man standing there who was there, and he was making a phone call to somebody else. I guess one of his friends, about a situation. Maybe his car was broken down, or he needed gas, or there was some kind of a situation. And I saw him talking on the phone, and then I asked him, since he was kind of off and isolated on his own, I asked him if perhaps he could give me a ride into town, or to the nearest truck stop. And he said, yeah, no problem. So then I got into his car. It was like this Volvo, old kind of Volvo car. And he was young. He was like 19 years old. And I was 30, 31. He was very young. And he seemed to be pretty smart and mature for his age. So he was not living with his parents anymore. I mean, he was, out on his own. And he said, yeah, no problem. And then once we were in the car, I noticed he had scars all over his hands or wrists, and I asked what it was from, and he said he was a cutter. And that's when I learned about people who do that to themselves because of distress. And then I found out, well, he told me that his family was rich, or had quite a lot of money, and that there was some abuse or whatever. And then while we were in the car, he wanted to stop somewhere and get something, he wanted to get a prescription drug for himself, and then he crushed it, and then he snorted it. Yeah, but he asked me if I wanted any, and I said no. I don't think he took that much, because I think maybe he had been doing it for a long time. So I think for him it really wasn't that much. And in the situation that I was in, where I'm at the mercy of whoever I'm with, as long as they're not harming me, if he did that, it's not like I was going to report that, because he wasn't hurting me. At least, and I didn't see him hurting anybody else. But later, I met somebody else who I thought it sounded like she was being exploited by a judge, or a couple judges. Like, it sounded like they were using her like a prostitute or something. Basically, if she slept with them or did things with them, then she would have her rent paid. But it was more of like, kind of sounded more like coercive. And after hanging out with them for about a week, I decided to I wasn't with them anymore, hanging out with them anymore. I was on my own and about ready to just try to still get back over to the East Coast. And I made a phone call on my cell phone to the FBI, because I wanted to report which judges I thought were responsible, because I was concerned for her safety and what they were doing. I didn't think that was fair. So I wasn't just interested in my own sexual assault cases. I was interested in her situation as well. And why I called the FBI, I just thought maybe the FBI is different from state to state. But the other thing is that we went to a casino one time, and there was a man that showed up who looked like he really didn't like me. He was taller, he was in his mid-20s, and he was good looking, and his shirt said Brown University on it. And I just remember him watching me everywhere, and I remember thinking, I just ended up in the middle of nowhere in New Mexico, and I still have somebody following me around and spying on me. I could not believe it. I mean, when I left the apartment complex, I kept my head down in that car so nobody could see me the entire way out to the freeway. And, I was trying to be as discreet as possible about where I was going. And then all of a sudden, it's like people are still showing up, and they seem to know my location. I'm going to stop there for just a minute.